Hello and welcome to the mixtapes. I'm your co-host Amber, joined by my lovely co-host Nikki. Hi, Nikki.
Hey, Amber.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm super excited to welcome an old friend of mine, Carm, to join the mixtapes today. Hi, Carm.
Hello.
We're so glad you're here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both for having me here. I'm excited.
So, for our listeners, Carm and I did Teach for America together a long time ago. It feels like in 2019 out in South Dakota. And she is an incredible person and an educator and a leader. And so, we're really excited to have her on the podcast to share about her experiences being multiracial. So, warm welcome to you, Carm.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
So,
Okay, Carm. So we do this little thing at the beginning of every podcast where we just want to highlight and celebrate something good. So we start off with just asking our guest or each other, tell me something good. So Nikki, I'm gonna have you go first. Nikki, tell us something good.
I have a really good something good for you guys. It was Bad Bunny's Tiny Desk concert. Oh my God. It just came out yesterday and I finally watched it today. And I am so in love with that man. I was just sitting there just dreaming over him. And oh my God, everything about it. Everybody, his little band, his bando, like everyone is Puerto Rican. And like the diversity represented in that group was so awesome too. There were so many Afro Latino people in that video. And all the instruments and his voice is just incredible. And I was feeling super moved by his song about Hawaii, which I think is called Lo que pasó Hawaii, but it's about he compares the stories of colonization of Hawaii to Puerto Rico, and he's giving a warning to like Native Hawaiian people: don't give up your culture or your flag. And like, it's just such a powerful song, and I was like crying at work watching it. And I also just think he's so beautiful, and I love him. So like even his shirt in the background, if you were to kind of stand away from the screen, it looks like he's just wearing a floral shirt. But when you get closer, it's a whole baseball scene. It's literally a baseball game. There's like a pitcher and a hitter and a crowd. But when you look at it from a distance, it looks like flowers.
That's cool. All right. So, I would say that this morning I was teaching a class and we were just doing our lesson and all of a sudden more people started to walk in and one of my coworkers walks in and I see her walk by and I said, "Oh, hey, Tiffany." And one of the kids, I didn't notice that he noticed I noticed her. So he looked up at me and he said, "Is that your sister?" And he's like 4 probably, but I was like, "Oh no, that's my coworker." And I just thought that was so cute because I don't know, he was just like noticing that I seen another coworker come in and I just try to usually greet anyone who walks into the room, but I thought that was just cute.
That is cute.
That is so cute. And what grade are you teaching right now?
Oh yeah, so this is Head Start and early Head Start. So the youngest is like probably 6 months up to 4-year-olds now. Yeah.
Great. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's so
I
fun.
love that. I love people who can work with the little babies, like the youngest of, the school age children. Takes a special person. So thank you for all of your love and patience. I'm sure that you show them all the time.
Absolutely. Amber, what is your something good?
Something good. Um, Officially have an 18-year-old, I guess. Something good. I'm trying to be excited about it, but I'm also like, I gave birth to a baby 18 years ago. And my 18-year-old asked me, um, do I feel older? And I was like, no, actually, I don't. It doesn't feel that long ago that you came here in the world, not 18 years at least. Um, and I don't feel like, oh my goodness, I feel so much older. I'm just like, yep, I'm proud that there's an 18-year-old person that I, brought to this world more than anything. And I didn't make it about like, oh, I feel old. I'm just like, wow, I'm just so grateful for that. So that's my something good.
That's so beautiful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yay.
And happy birthday to your baby.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Sweet 18.
I know.
For real. The 18. That's
I'm trying to
awesome.
think of what I was like when I was 18. Probably not
Definitely
cool.
not an adult, right? You didn't feel like an adult, did you? 'Cause I definitely did not.
No, me neither.
It's so crazy that you say that because I went to see my brothers play. My brother is 16 and he was like the assistant stage manager at his school play or whatever. So I went to go see it and like my school that I teach at now is 6th through 12th grade. So like the kids were relatively the same age, you know, as my students, but they looked so grown on the stage for some reason and I was like, "Wait, these kids are the same age as my students." Like I don't know why, it like threw me off. Like cuz like I've just been thinking about age a lot and how we're so fluid and like it can mean so much different. But anyway, all right. Well, we're gonna jump in because we are the mixtape. So obviously, we want to ask you some questions, kind of just about like your experiences being a mixed race person. So I want to start by asking, how would you describe your racial identity?
Alrighty, so I was thinking about this, and there's a lot of layers to it because um, it's always instilled in us that we're also dual citizens too. So that's what comes to mind first. And I won't talk so much about that today, but being a dual citizen is just means that like our tribe for Rosebud Sioux tribe, we're federally recognized. And so we're a sovereign nation that the United States acknowledges, and there's treaties and agreements to that. But for today, I'm just mostly going to talk about the social and cultural parts of that, growing up and what that was like with my own people, but also in South Dakota too. So socially and culturally, I would say, so my mom is Lakota, she's Native, and then my dad is white. But I grew up with my dad and I didn't grow up with my mom. Her parental rights were terminated. And that happens a lot in Indian country. So I don't think I knew I was Native until probably when I went to an Indian boarding school. So a long time ago, it was called Indian Industrial Boarding Schools. And then slowly over time, they were changed to more cultural, and you have to be Native to go to those schools. So that's when I think I realized probably around third grade that I was Native and I was going to a school with other Natives. And then there was other kids that we recognized that were darker skinned, and then there's other ones that were lighter complected, and there's a lot of layers and culturally and socially within being biracial, of being Native and being white as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see that. When you went to boarding school, you were in third grade.
Yeah. I was bullied really bad in the public school from like, I think we started noticing it in kindergarten. And then, so that's why I went to that school. And a lot of my other friends that were bullied, they all left to different schools too. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately about like, my other friends, because they were some of my best friends from like, jeez, probably Head Start and then preschool and then kindergarten into first grade and second grade was so ruthless. And then school board meetings, and I guess one of the parents was even recording one of the meetings. And I've been asking my dad some of those questions like, what all happened? Just re asking him just to, think, because I think about it sometimes. And then I'll think about it again later and I'll just ask questions again. And yeah, it's just so crazy to think back to those times. And then to think about him in that same school as a white man with Native students back in like the 60s and 70s is way worse than when I was there in the early 2000s.
What brought your dad to that area? What brought him to Rosebud?
So I was just talking about this with my Lexi Leland. We were talking about our family trees, and he was asking me about mine and my dad. I remember my dad telling me about how my grandma's family, the white side, how they came from out east and towards the west. But I need to ask my dad that again because my dad is a Shouldis, so that's where I get my last name. And his mom, my grandma, her husband, his last name was Shouldis, and so her last name was Green. So he knows more so about her story because my grandpa died when he was really young before my dad knew him. So I do remember him telling me a little bit about how my grandma's family came from the east to the west, and just like what life was like that out on the prairie with a farm and stuff, and how hard and difficult that was. And I didn't really get to hear too much about my mom's side on my native side, probably only maybe like a generation or two back. But my dad could tell me a little bit more about my mom's side on the white side.
I'm curious how your identity has kind of evolved over time because I know you said you didn't really think of yourself as Native till you were at the boarding school. And as long as I've known you, you've been such a strong, proud Indigenous woman. So I'm curious, how did you go from that to that?
Yes. Yeah, I grew up in White River, South Dakota, and I remember understanding that I was Native and doing cultural things and cultural crafts when I was in boarding school at Peer Indian Learning Center. And then I remember we were learning Lakota too, but at the time I didn't feel like I really understood what that was at all. And then so I was there until middle school and then came back to White River. And there wasn't really too much like native or cultural things that I was into when I was in high school. They offered Lakota language again, but I didn't take those classes. Then I went to college, and then I remember my advisor saying, "Do you want to take a Native Studies course? Do you want to take Lakota Language 1?" And I was like, "No." Like, I said, "No, no, thank you." And then the next semester came by, and the advisor was, she must have been, well, looking back, I know now that she was the advisor for Native students. And then she tried to get me to take those courses again. I was like, "No." And I remember telling one of my friends, I'm like, "I'm so annoyed of that." So I never did. And then finally, I was at the Native American Cultural Center hanging out with my friends, and they were like talking about treaties, and they were talking about, like, I think it was a test or an exam coming up for them, and they were studying and they were asking each other questions and just making sure they understood like the answers to them. And I think they were like clarifying with each other, and I overheard them and I was like, "Wow, what are you guys talking about?" And then they explained it, and I was like, "Wow, I didn't know about treaties. What's that?" And they explained it all, and I was like, "Wow, what class is this?" And then they were taking Lakota too, and so I kind of got interested, and eventually I took all the language classes I could, and I had a minor in teaching Lakota language, and with that I had to take some of the Native Studies courses. So I did, and man, I really enjoyed it. I learned so much. And then me and my health science background with public health and learning about IHS, Indian Health Service, and learning about everything that the government did to our people, and even regards into health, like women's sterilization and pushing on C-sections to our women even today. I mean, all of that is wow. So I think that's when I start to really realize. And being at the Native American Cultural Center too, one of my friends taught me how to smudge. I remember she's like, "Here, can you smudge for us?" And I was like, "Smudge? How do I do that?" She's like, "You never smudged before?" And I was like, "No, never." And she's like, "You just take leaves off, you roll it in a ball, and then you light it." And I was like, "Wow." And so, like, little simple stuff like that, I learned at college with other Native students, not even just like Lakota, but like my friend that taught me that, her tribe was Omaha, like Omaha. And so I learned a lot there. And they did have a NEPI there, and so, which is sweat. And so, um, I think it was like college once it actually start to like absorb and instill into me all of that.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that. That is so cool. I love hearing about your journey of like really just starting to learn more about your identity and then like, taking it and running with it and learning so much. That's beautiful. Thank you. Our next question for you is like when you're filling out forms, and maybe you can even reference like what happened when you first started college to, okay, now I'm learning more about like my background and my identity, which boxes do you usually check?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the beginning, like when I was younger, around college time, in my undergrad, I remember always selecting like native and white. And then I remember I didn't get this internship, and I was really upset by it because I thought I was really gonna get in, and because I had seen them in person before. And one of my friends said she was talking to me. I can't really quite remember what exactly she said, but it kind of brought brought me into the awareness of checkboxing things. So after that, I just chose to only click Native American. And I kind of like stopped clicking white. And I think it was because around that time, just trying to get into programs and research opportunities and internships, and a lot after a while, I did find specifically native and specifically health ones. But yeah, I think that was my first time. And then I I know the census around here, not a lot of native people fill it out. And I think there's just like a lot of distrust with that too, like filling out forms. But the people that I've been around, they've instilled like do fill out these forms like the census, like do fill them out because they are very important. And you might not think they are because of our distrust and our experiences historically, but it's really important too. And so even like voting and even in tribal elections, like being educated on certain legislation within our own tribe too. Like, I think there was a recent one, and I'm not like very politically educated, but I think there was like one recent that I'm gonna butcher this really bad, but had to do with our IRA government, and it's from something Foster was telling me about, because he's more politically engaged than I am and informed than I am, but it was something with voting within how our government is structured because it's IRA, and someone like in our tribe thought that we would be firing Deb Holland in her position, and that like was not the case in that at all. But it just kind of showed light and shed light on like how much our people are not like politically informed and educated in themselves about our own government too. And so I think checkboxing and like filling out forms and like just being very consciously and educated and very aware of what that means is like really important. So I will say that.
Yeah.
I want to validate though, like it's so important. I agree with you because we have to learn how to navigate the systems that we live under, right? But at the same time, it's innately unnatural to be involved in these processes that are so white supremacist in nature. That's not your nature. So it makes sense that it's hard for people, especially for Native people, to have to do that because that system is not at
Yeah.
all cultural to what, your is like in your blood.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. Like even IRA is not the way that our like having the setup of IRA is not traditionally our way of how we make decisions and stuff either. So even that, I think that's why maybe it just doesn't even really work, and we see a lot of like issues with our tribal council and things like that. Why there's so many issues that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And then like how many treaties have been misconstrued too, and
I'm so glad we're talking about this because I feel like it's a full circle moment hearing you share, Carm, about how powerful it was for you to finally learn parts about yourself and learn your history and like learn more about where you come from and your people and like your cultural practices. And so it's like now you have this like incredible knowledge, like, you've got your in your head and in your heart, and you can like continue to educate your community, which you already are doing, to like dismantle that system so that like one day like you don't even have to check a box because no one's even asking. You know what I mean?
That's it
yeah,
right there. Yeah.
yeah,
Knowledge is power. And I'm just stuck on that right now because of all this like trying to make it illegal to talk about our histories in school, and it's like
yeah.
because they don't want you to have that light bulb moment of like, oh my God, I matter. I come from giants. You know that phrase, like I have a legacy. I'm curious, do you know your parents' story of like how they met?
Man, this is funny because I tease my dad a lot. So I have 5 siblings. I have a lot more siblings than that, but the 5 that I will talk about, they all have the same mom and dad, and we share the same dad, but not the same mom. So, and their mom's Native too. And I'm pretty sure that she was friends with my mom, their mom. So I always tease my dad about that. But yeah, so their mom, she's Native and she's still alive, and but my mom passed away like back in 20 during the pandemic, but I didn't really know her. And in fact, like I'm sure that there was drinking involved and probably drugs. And so yeah, like a lot of people don't really know my mom's side of the family. And I've heard like a little bit of her parents before her and her grandparents, and but I don't know a lot. And only a few maybe older people know my mom's side. I've tried to ask my dad, but he knows a little bit, but not a lot. And I think they probably met through my siblings' mom. Yeah, but they both, my siblings' parents lost their parental rights to them. And so they all grew up in the system, all 5 of them split up throughout the state of South Dakota. And then when my dad had me and my mom lost her parental rights to me. And then my dad maintained his parental rights for me. So he raised me, and that's how I grew up with him. And I remember she's from like Norris, Black Pipe area. And my dad lived in White River. And I think my sibling's mom, I think she was from Mission. But yeah, so I don't, that's all as much as I can piece together about how they met each other. But my dad always was friends with the Native people in White River. He grew up being friends with the Native people, and from the sounds of it, he just fit in more with Native people and not so much with the white crew in White River, because it's kind of it's very much like a rancher, and I think my dad just fit in with the natives more. That from the sounds of it, that's how he made it sound, is that he had a lot of native friends, and um it was racial back then, I think, and it's not as racial anymore.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And it gives us more context into your dad and what your life has been like. So thank you.
Okay, so you told us that you went to boarding school because you were bullied. So I wanted to ask, as far as for navigating school and childhood as someone with a mixed race background, do you feel like the bullying had anything to do with that? Or and how did that show up when you did go to boarding school, knowing that you have this mixed race background?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, so I noticed the bullying, it was with the native boys in the class, but our teachers were mostly white women. I don't think I was really bullied because I was native, but I think I was bullied because I fought back and spoke up. And I don't know why I did, but I just remember being like picked on a lot, and I was like, I would just do things right back to whoever was doing it to me. But my teachers, I think, in my perspective from being a child there, I don't think I was like taken seriously. And I remember always telling my dad, and I think they put like quote unquote bad kids in one classroom specific to this older teacher, this older one. And then I remember the other class in kindergarten, it was like the fun class. And she was a younger teacher, and she was white too, but she was younger, and you didn't ever see her really get mad at kids. But in our class, we were always getting in trouble. So I think I was grouped with the bad kids, weird kids. And I think that followed through into first grade and second grade. And then, cause man, first grade, I'm pretty sure, yeah, it was first grade. My teacher really pissed me off so bad that I wanted to say fuck. So I was sitting there and I spelled it and I wrote Fuck. And I got it right. I didn't know that, but I was like, I taught
Great.
myself basically how to spell that. And my teacher was like, looked at my paper and she's like, go to the principal's office. And I was like, whoa, I must have spelled that word right. So I was like always in the principal's office. And I just remember all the principals we had by name. And it was boring to be in there and it was hot and there was always a fan and there's a small room and it was next to the nurse's office and then I went to second grade and that teacher was really mean. She was known to have long nails and then she would put her fingers, these two fingers in the back of our neck and like squeeze it. And so you could always tell like if there was a kid and like if you're talking to another kid, that teacher would be, if that kid starts saying something off the wall, that teacher would be like, and she would do that. And then that kid would be like, and we all thought it was, and we would laugh at each other because we knew that one was getting like pinched or whatever. But that was when the bullying was the worst. Like it was so bad. I just remember one time we had a sub and me and this boy got into it and we were fighting and he just grabbed my head and slammed it on the desk. And by the time I stood up and looked around, all the kids ran to that side of the classroom by the teacher and she was just standing there with her hands on her hips. And I was like vividly like stuck in my brain, but then I went to the office. But one of the other stories I don't quite remember that my dad does remember is we were lining up to come inside from recess and I was holding the door open and the one boy, that same boy that I had just fought, I don't know how close in proximity this was in the year, but he had walked by me and just slapped me across the face. And so I don't remember what I did. My dad just reminded me of this. And so that kid got suspended and the teacher actually saw that. So, like I said, I always just defended myself. But I do remember that parent to that kid came and came to our house. And I remember answering the door and I remember there's a screen door and she was there and I seen her and she asked for my dad. So I went and got my dad and he came back and I stood to the side and I kind of watched them talk to each other. And she was upset, I think, that her son got suspended and I didn't, and that I think her kid was in trouble. And she said, I know she's not all there. And my dad was just like, whatever, just like, yeah, whatever. And I remember it being like super, super tense and awkward. And I always asked my dad about that growing up after that. And that kid was really mean. And so I left for third grade, but when I came back for seventh grade, he was still there. And I guess my dad was a janitor at the school, so this kid would always ask my dad, like, why did Carm leave? Why did she leave to go to a different school? And my dad, he didn't tell him, like, he just like was like, she's just at a different school, like, and so he never said anything. But this kid, I had home ec class with him. And one day he just said, in the beginning of the school year, he said, your dad said that you're coming back at high school. And it was like seventh grade, eighth grade. And he's like, so when you were going to come back, that's when I was going to leave and go to Myrtle. And I was like, weird. How did you even know that I was supposed to come back at ninth grade? So I was like, my dad said that? So I went home and asked my dad, like, oh, did you tell this kid that I was supposed to come back at freshman year? Dad was like, no, I never said that. And maybe one of my friends, because I did have one close best friend I stayed in contact with, maybe she told people. But anyway, after that year, I think it was either into eighth grade or maybe it was freshman year, he did leave. He actually did leave and he went to a different school. And I don't know if he just hated me so bad or what, but yeah.
Not
So
him like keeping tabs on you
yeah,
from second.
throughout all those years. But he went to like prison once he became an adult and like beat up one of his cousins with like a skateboard with like no wheels on the other end of it. and like gave that kid like stitches all over their, like, over 100 stitches, I think. And yeah, so it's
Damn,
rough.
he had some things to work through.
Mhm.
So, okay.
So yeah.
I'm so sorry that you even had to like be exposed to someone like that.
Mm.
That was not
Yeah,
okay.
so I think about that sometimes. I'm like, yeah, and because sometimes I don't know, like I think back to just like the way that I was treated at the school. And I remember one of the teachers at a summer program when I came, I can't remember when it was, but I was still younger in like elementary. One of the teachers said, "You're back from treatment." And I was like, "Treatment? The fuck?" I was like, I was like, I know what treatment is because my friends at boarding school, like, and yeah, it was like rough kids that went to boarding school there at Parenting Learning Center, but they would tell me about what treatment is and stuff. But I told my dad, I'm like, she said I went to treatment. And then my dad was like, and it was a older white woman that said this to me. And my dad addressed it right away to her and was like, she didn't go to treatment. Like, it's just a private boarding school for Native kids. And it was like, actually, like, for me, it was a really good experience too. Like, we did horseback riding, we did beadwork, we did dream catchers, and we did a lot of like good curriculum stuff too. And it showed me a lot about merit, and it showed me a lot about like making friends and like good healthy relationships and sports and stuff. For me, I felt like it was good and I made a lot of good friends, but I guess the perception of my hometown had a different understanding of what that was. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you ended up having like a good experience at the new school. And do you feel like your childhood kind of inspired you to become a teacher? Is there a connection there?
Oh, my dad always reminds me of that because I did become a teacher, like Teach for America, and I still am teaching. But I remember getting close to graduating and figuring out like a career, or like, oh no, was it graduating high school and thinking about what career to go into for college? And my dad was like, just bouncing ideas off of me and just like, oh, what about being a teacher? And I was like, and he said, I don't remember this, but I said, oh, hell no. But I was like, did I really? I was like, I think I might have faintly remembered that. But yeah, like I do recall like in the beginning of college in my undergrad, like I could not have seen myself be a teacher. But I think like being recruited into Teach for America and going to the Native Alliance Initiative and like hearing their lessons on treaties and like culture and stuff, I'm like, whoa, you can teach kids about that stuff like in the classroom because I never learned about that. So that's kind of like how I got interested into TFA. And then I joined it, and then that's, like, ever since then, just been, like, teaching, and yeah, I really enjoy it.
That's amazing. Curious what you think about this. Amber and I have talked about this a bunch. TFA has such a bad rep these days, especially in the DEI world, because of the mentality of we're taking a bunch of mainly white middle class kids who studied something that's not teaching and sending them to either inner cities or reservations to teach black and brown kids. And so there's this like whole like discourse about how it's like a shitty program. And I feel like when I always talk about it, I'm like, I know TFA sucks, but I felt like our region did a good job. Like I felt like the South Dakota like Native Alliance Initiative. Like they did like some good work. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I recognize TFA's, like, rap too, because 'cause I've been asked a lot of people about this, and a lot of my friends who are Native on the res and in Rosebud are like, "Those TFAers, TFA," and I'm like, "Hey, TFA was good with me." But yeah, I recognize that too, like, the other side of it, and I've talked with, like, TFA staff about that too, and they recognize it, but yeah, our region, for me, I felt like coming out of college and the things that we were doing in our region was very validating, especially as a Native person, like, in that. And I always seen like all of our work that we were doing, like I didn't get like an excuse card from it just because I was Native either. And I didn't see that like other Native people who were in the cohort either get an excuse either. And I always like tried to remind myself of that too. Like being Native doesn't mean that it's going to make it easier for you to like connect with students. Like you still have to put in the work too. And that's how I seen it for like even for myself. But I think for like majority of our region, they were people of color and or Native too. And they did a lot of work with the Native like organizations and with the tribe and with the tribes. So I mean, I liked it, but I seen other issues too. So I think like the biggest thing that I learned like in my first year teaching was that I was letting students just do what they wanted to do, like sitting at the carpet, like as a first year teacher, and acknowledging that they don't always have to like be making eye contact with me and answering the comprehension questions like perfectly. And I was being like chill about that. And then just that my principal, I went by Miss Carm when I taught at the public school. And then later when I was teaching like in immersion, we changed it to kinship terms. But my principal walked in and was like, "Are you guys listening to Miss Shouldis?" And I was like, whoa, I don't even go by Miss Shouldis, but like just that whole demeanor. And I was like, whoa. And so, and I did try my best to like talk to my principal about how I prefer to like teach and that it might be a little bit different. And, but talking with TFA, it was encouraged in me to, I don't know how to explain this, but like to have high expectations because you love your students, but also at the same time, like not an aggressive, hostile way. And that's what I felt like I was getting pressure from like the public school to be like aggressive and yell and like demand attention and eye contact. But like with TFA, it was like I guess the lens of it was different. It was more like through love and high expectations and the idea of wanting your kids to succeed and just being a Native teacher as a first year teacher in the schools compared to other teachers, non-TFA, but also Native teachers, veteran Native teachers too, and having these like conversations with my principal about I remember my this might be off topic, but my principal used the example of our Native teachers are our best teachers because they're on it. They're like um more strict and more rigor and all these things and I seen that and I recognize that, but also Foster asked me one time during that time period is like, but is it because they're also like pressed and stressed from the system too? And I was like, damn, I did not think of that in the moment of the conversation with my principal. It was just something I had to take note of and observe and think about it.
And just in your experiences, being Native that I like kind of resonate with me as being like, a Black woman and like having like really awful, like, childhood experiences in schools. And then literally saying the same thing when it was suggested, like, you should be a teacher. I was like, oh no, 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 no. But then at the same time, being like, no, like, I have this opportunity to be a voice for Black children and connect with them in ways that maybe the white teachers couldn't have or don't sometimes. And I feel like that resonates with me and how you showed up for, students in when you were in TFA. The other students that were Native, like, you were like, I'm on the carpet with them, I'm asking questions, and I'm not really expecting a lot because I feel like you were finding ways to connect with your students that wasn't like in that traditional strict kind of sense.
Yeah.
So I just really appreciate that, that we have that in common in those ways and how that showed up and that you were able to be, representative for the kiddos in your school that you worked with. Okay, so we're going to ask you our last question. So, what's something that you wish more people understood about being multiracial?
Oh man. I guess there's more than how a person looks, like what meets the eye, I guess. Like there's so much stories and layers and history and like this conversation that we've been having about parents and their grandparents and just like the generations before leading up to like what we're seeing today and that there's more there to get to know someone with than how they're showing up and talking to you that day. I guess that's what I would say.
I love that. I would love I want to put your TikTok handle in our show notes. And I would love for you to speak a little bit about what that's been like kind of your process of reclamation in your culture and the work you're doing and with the language and even with like your is it gardening? I don't know. I don't want to use the wrong term, but like all the stuff you're doing, like I don't know if you want to end on that note just by sharing.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So my TikTok, yeah, I mostly do language videos and for I forgot to mention a lot of that, but like I taught immersion for 3 years and really enjoyed it and loved it. And then I'm not in immersion anymore, but I am still like doing language revitalization work and I do the culture and language at Head Start for our tribe. And so I like to do language videos about just like whatever I'm doing so that it can pertain to a person's daily life. Like either if you're like, what's an example? Like gardening, like you're talking about, like gardening and food sovereignty and foraging or making medicines or canning and cooking, 'cause those are things that you do, like, that are good for your health and being outdoors too. I love to be outdoors. But cooking too is like everybody cooks and you're cutting vegetables and you're using, oil in the pan and you're washing things and you're cleaning up. So those are like language that you can use every day. And everyone loves to eat food. So that's another way to like kind of like encourage people on TikTok to pick up some of that language. And I've been recently getting into just like telling some res war stories too. Like, I don't know if you've seen the recent one about this scar on my head, but just like things like that. And so, yeah.
That sounds amazing. And definitely give me your TikTok handle because now I want to follow you and learn more about your story and your life experiences. Thank you so much for letting us just have like a little glimpse. I'm sure there's like so many stories that you could tell us. You're an amazing storyteller. And I love how you even just appreciate hearing stories over and over and over and like connecting the dots and, just refreshing your memory on your own experiences growing up and what you remember and then hearing the story again and adding new information. I think that is just so cool. I really respect that and appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us this afternoon on our podcast. We are going to end our podcast here, listeners. But one thing that we do when we close out is we all just share an intention that we'd like to just set as we go into the upcoming week or the next day. So, Nikki, would you like to kick us off by sharing an intention that you have?
Sure. I've been reading the 12 Steps of Abolition. I think it's what it's called by Patrisse Cullors. She's one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. And something that's been sticking with me is responding versus reacting. And she gives really good advice of when we see and hear things that are triggering, like we want to react right away and we might not do or say the things that we should really do that are in the best interest of like the movement versus responding, which is like taking a second to actually think about how this is impacting me, why I'm feeling triggered. Like instead of kind of like canceling somebody, more so just like bringing them in for like a restorative conversation. That's my long way of saying my intention is to really focus on responding versus reacting because I definitely have a tendency to react and that can be very harmful in justice movements. So my intention is to respond and not react. Amber, what is your intention?
I would say that my intention is, I feel like a little similar to yours, not necessarily in the ways that I'm reading the same book, but I think taking more time in thinking about what I want to say. I've had some experiences recently um, that have had an impact on me. And I think that like it's important for me to still stick up for myself, but I think being more intentional about what is it that I really want to say and how can this come across in a way that I feel like I'm heard and I'm thoughtful in what I want to say, and that like there's an actual acknowledgement or hope in the acknowledgement of those experiences. So just really trying to be mindful about, hey, this harm was caused. How can I speak up for myself without just like, internalizing it and walking away, but like, hey, like you caused harm. Let me tell you how. And then like this is some things that I think would be helpful in fixing it.
That's so powerful.
What about you, Carm?
Thank you both for that because, wow, I think I needed to hear that. I resonated with those. That's been on my mind a lot lately too, especially as of just this morning. But I would say an intention. Did you say for the rest of the week?
Sure.
I would say probably this bead work that I've started because I'm working on some moccasins. And part of me doesn't even want to say this out loud because the last time I worked on moccasins, I got one done and I did not finish the other side. But I'm trying a different approach this time. And I think like my intention is going to be that just do it even if it like looks all messed up and how I say like jacked up and just not pretty, but get to the point of like actually finishing the moccasins so that I at least have the experience to like try again. And if I did make mistakes, like I can get better at it. And so, because before I was like worrying about the lines and like drawing on a pencil on the pen and making sure it all lines up. And if it didn't line up, I was getting stuck. And so I think my intention is going to be like, just do it and don't worry so much about it, like lining up and being perfect and the design making sense and stuff the first time. Cause I think just me getting caught up on that prevents me from even actually beating. So, yeah.
We could definitely get in our own ways, can't we? So I hope that you do finish them.
Thank you.
I do too.
Yes.
You will.
You will. Yes. Don't let perfectionism hold you back. You got this.
Yes.
Well, this is the mixtapes. Please follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, on Instagram threads, and all the fun things. Email us if you want to send anyone our way or you want to join our podcast. We talk about everything from racial identity, mixed race experiences, interracial relationships, everything. So feel free to send people our way or follow us on social media. Thank you so much, Carm, for being on. And thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in again this week.
Yes, and thank you, Amber and Nikki. It was really good to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you and peace and love, y'all.